Okay, in this lecture, we're going to be talking about your first assignment, which is called the beginnings, which you're going to hand in a discussion on FSO. So what are we going to be doing in this assignment? Uh, we're going to be using Unity, which is a tool that you guys used in design tools, to recreate a scene from an old video game, not even old, but a video game scene, that an existing video game scene you guys are going to recreate in Unity 3D using a constrained amount of tools that Unity will give you. And so we're not going to be importing assets, you're not going to be importing textures, you're going to be learning a few things about how to manipulate game objects and give them color and do stuff. And basics for the Unity 3D engine and manipulating objects in the 3D engine Unity. And so what you're going, at the end of this, what you're going to need to turn into your discussion is you're going to need to post 3 screenshots of your work in your discussion on different days, and your final one's going to be as close as possible to this final, the existing source image that you chose. So an example of this, you can see that this is Miss Pac-Man, and this would be an example of a source image that you would choose. You can't choose this one because we use it as an example. But if you see that this would be, for your first image, this would be a good example of a first blockout image. You can see that you can put in the world, there's very primitive rectangles, capsules, spheres, and they're blocked out in such a way that they build the framework of what you're trying to do here. So you don't try to create, if you want to start this, don't try to make the perfect ghost right at the beginning. You want to get a good framework of all the pieces that you're going to need to do this. Because if you find you didn't do it correctly for one of these things, you might have to go back and change it later. So build a good blockout framework. Don't worry about making it look perfect. But the second one, you can see that they're starting to add some detail here. So the ghost, and the first one, the ghost was just a cylinder. And now they found some interesting ways to give it a little bit of detail. Pac-Man has a mouth. And there's some interesting techniques that were used to actually make that look like that and make the ghost. And these are a little more rounded, and there's pellets in here. So the second one is just a bit more detail. You're learning the techniques you're going to be using to make your objects look more like they would in the scene that you chose. And the third object, you can see all the colors added. There's all the detail that you would need. There's a little bow on here. All the lives are put down here. Little cherries put down here. There's a high score thing here. There's a thing for score right here. So you can see that this would be a good example of a final replication of this. It's not perfect, and it's not meant to be perfect. You're not going to have all the tools you need to make it perfect. But I can see even in this one, you can see the big power pellets already been in here. So, it's not going to be perfect, but you want to get it as close as possible to your chosen source image using the tools that we have. So what are we going to be, why are we doing this? Why are we going to be using, painfully recreating these scenes out of small pieces that we've learned in Unity? We have to learn how to use this tool Unity, and it's going to come through practice, and it's going to come through using the tool over and over and over again. So this assignment is so that you painstakingly sometimes have to continue to learn how to manipulate these objects in 3D space. Manipulating objects in 3D space is extremely important when working in this engine, or if you want to make a 3D video game. So we're going to make you do that over and over and over again. And so the engine we're going to be using is Unity 3D. This is a tool that you should have used in design tools. I think you make your winter scene in Japan in design tools using this. And if you don't know what a game engine is, also known as middleware, it is a suite of technology that allows you to jump some of the technological hurdles it takes to make a video game. There are things we need to make a video game. You need to render objects to the screen. You need to be able to get input. You need to make sure objects interact with each other, whether they collide or tell you that they've triggered something. Sound, input, I already said input, but all these things they're solved problems. People have done these things already. So these engines are just a suite that says, I'm not going to make you program that from scratch. We've done that already. Just learn how to use it. So there's other game engines out there. There's game engines like Unreal 4 and GameMaker, and these do the same thing. They're a suite of technology that allows you to leapfrog some of the technological hurdles it would take to make a video game, so that we can get to do what we want to do, which is design a game and see that design be realized, so that we can start playing it. What are we learning in this assignment? I already mentioned we're learning about how to manipulate objects in 3D space. So in Unity, these objects are called game objects. And we're going to use, all game objects have a transform on them. And that's the object, that's the component that allows them to be manipulated in 3D space through positional, rotational, and scaling of the objects. We're going to learn how to manipulate the transform to do those things over and over and over again. And lights, and we're going to learn how to apply and create materials so we can get colors on these objects. We're going to learn about prefabs and the camera, so that we can make the view of the game that we're actually using look like the scene that we're trying to recreate. So Unity, you should have opened it and created a project up to this point, but if you haven't, I'm going to do that really quickly with you guys. I'm going to just get out of the full screen on this. And I have a Unity project open, but I'm going to create a new one here. And I have Unity right here. I'm just going to double click it. Put the battle tag down. I'm going to create a new one. So I just double click this, and you can see the option here. I'm just going to create a new project. I already had one there. This is where your project's going to be located. So it's kind of important, because if you ever want to find this, you want to know where that's at. So it's usually a good idea to make a new folder for it. So in my documents, I made an IND1 grading. I made an IND1 projects one. I'm just going to go into IND projects folder, and that's where I want my project to exist. And I called it Unity project. I already made a bunch of these, so I'm going to call this. I made one called Beginnings already. I'm going to call it Project 1. It's fine. And I'm going to create this project. So it's going to take a second to actually boot up when it does this, but I'm going to go back into where I created that project. So if I go here, back into Documents, into IND1 Projects, you're going to see that here's all the projects I made. I made one Beginnings, IND1. I just made this one called Projects. But if I click on this, you're going to see a bunch of folders in here. And so this is where your project exists. If anyone ever asks you to zip up your project and give it to me, which we may ask you to do during this degree, this is where you'd go find it. Go remember where you created the project, and you have a folder that is your project. And there's some folders in here that you should know about. We'll get more into them later, but your assets folder is pretty much the most important folder. It's where your game lives. Library temp and temp, they're just kind of techie stuff that you don't need to worry about right now. You'll get more into that later. And project settings are for the things that you do in Unity. Your asset folder holds all your stuff in it. And I don't have anything in this one right now. If I went to another one, you'd probably see. If I went into IND1, I have materials and prefabs in this one. And so when you create things, they'll go into that assets folder. So it's just good to know where your project's at when doing that. So that's what this slide does. It just kind of shows you how to create a project and what that folder is. We'll go to the next slide. So let's talk about moving around in 3D space and the concept of a widget. And we're going to talk about transforms and game objects also. So I'm just going to kind of cover these three slides: game object, and transform, and moving around in 3D space. So the widget, this little picture right here, you're going to see this a lot in Unity. That is the widget and how you manipulate things in 3D space. And so what we're manipulating is a game object. So a game object is something that exists in the world. You have this imaginary 3D world, and you need some way to add objects to that world. And something that exists in the world is a game object, and it's allowed to exist in the world because of the transform. And we'll talk about that more in a bit, but the game objects are just empty, and they don't have any functionality to them. They're just kind of empty containers that exist in the world, and we add components to them. And the first component that is always added to a game object is this transform. And the transform holds the position, rotation, and scale of the object. So if I open up Unity and I have this blank project right here, uh, I'm going to create a game object in the world. And so I'm just going to I'm going to click here, and I'm going to go to, on the game object, I'm going to go to 3D object, and I'm going to create a simple cube. Well, actually, the first thing I'm going to do is create an empty game object just to show you something. So I created an empty game object in the world, and you can see that I just see the widget. I don't see anything else. And that widget represents the transform, as I was talking about. And that transform has three things: position, rotation, and scale. So if I grab this widget, and I'm controlling right now by holding down the right mouse button and just using WASD to get around the world like this. If I grab, you can see right here, this little compass type thing. It says X, and X is red, and Y is green, and Z is going to be blue. But understanding the concept of X, Y, and Z is really important. So there's a video associated with this in your beginnings assignment. So the beginnings assignment right here. We're going to touch on this at the end too, but just to show you, at the end of it, at the bottom of it, there's a game object basics video that you should be looking at, and you're going to get a much more in-depth explanation of some of these things. So I was on the transform here. In this transform, I have the concept of X, Y, and Z in 3D space. So 3D space, I have this world. In this world, I can govern and move around it in 3D space. I'm going to put this game object at 0, 0, 0, and I'm going to be doing this a lot because I want to know where my object's at in the world. And 0, 0, 0 is the center of this world. And it allows me to show you, if I move this right on the Z, you can see the Z component right here. The Z, or not the Z, I'm sorry, the X. If I move this on the X, I'm moving this object right and left in the world. Right and left in the world axes. And you can see that update, when I go past 0 to the left, it starts going negative, so there's negative X. And then when I go too far to the right, past 0, it starts getting positive. And you could do that with Y and with Z also. Y is up and down, X is left and right, and Z is in and out of the screen, or forward and backward. So this is an empty game object, and I say it's empty, but there's one thing that always has to be on a game object, and that's its transform, so that it can exist in the world. All right. So if I created something else here, and another way to create objects, the first time I went up to game object here and did that, and went to empty game object, you can just right click in here and go to 3D object, and I'm going to create a cube. And so this cube, now this just has some more components on it. What makes Unity's nice in the fact that it knows certain game objects that you want to make and gives them to you, and just makes them for you. And so we call these primitives. So under 3D objects, there's some primitives that you can use that Unity makes for you: cubes, spheres, capsules, cylinders, planes, quads. And so these are just 3D objects that have other components on them, and we get functionality on components, and we'll get more into that in another lecture. But this has a mesh render, and it has a mesh filter, and it has a collider so it can interact. But it still has that transform, and every game object you have is going to have that transform on it there. But this is going to allow me to show you some different things on how to move around in here. So again, I can move the object using this widget, clicking on these arrows, moving right, left, up, and down, forward, backward. I can go into here and set this at 0, 0, 0. If I just click in there, I'm now at the center of the world again. So I've kind of reset to the center of the world. You can also reset a transform by going to here and resetting the little gear and clicking reset, and it will reset this to 0, 0, 0. So this widget that we were talking about, it also allows us to do other things than just move the position of the transform. If we hit E, I have this clicked and I hit E, you can see the widget changes. And you can also see up here, this is kind of what governs your widget. So if I hit W and then hit E, W puts me back to the positional one where I can move this around. E gives me the rotational stuff. And you can still see that these little lines here, they correspond to the axes that I'm going to use them on. So Y, if I grab that, I can rotate on the Y. I can rotate on the X and I can rotate on the Z. And I can go reset this so that didn't happen anymore. And so hitting E or clicking this button allows me to change the rotation of an object, and the last part of the transform is the scale. So if I hit R or click this right here, it pulls up these, you see that the widget changed with these squares on it. And I can pull these and now change the scale of the object, which changes the size that it is in different directions. If I wanted to, and that works just like on the axis that you want. I'm going to reset again. If I wanted to uniformly scale this, like all the same size, I would just grab the middle white one. If you see there's a little white, a white big cube right in the center. So if I grab that and move, I can move it and scale this into different directions. So that's kind of the transform. It's very important to understand the transform and understand position, rotation, and scale, because that's how you're going to be doing the stuff in 3D space. And you're going to really have to start to understand the concept of 3D space and moving around 3D space to move these, to do things that you want with game objects here. So that kind of covers transform, moving around in 3D space, the game object, little bit on components and how you add functionality to that, and the transform and what we're doing with that. So there's some other parts here that you guys might want to know about when doing this beginnings assignment. Lights are important. There's a couple different types of lights, but if you see when you started the project, it gives you a main camera. It just gives you this when you start the project, and it gives you a directional light. So the directional light, there's a bunch of different kinds of lights, and when I click on the camera, or if I click on the light, you'll see that all this is another game object with a light component on it. It still has a transform because it exists in the world, and then it has a light component on it, which gives it its light logic. And so there's a couple different kinds. For this assignment, you're more than likely just going to use a directional light, which is pretty much just like the sun. You know, if I can actually rotate this directional light, and I didn't want to rename it. I want to click on that, hit E, and I can start rotating this, and you'll see as I rotate this, the light changes in the world. It kind of goes from like day to dusk to night, right? And so that is a directional light. It just affects everything in the world in the direction it is. There's spotlights and there's point lights. And spotlights kind of just like, it shows that little cone. See that little cone of light right there? If I wanted to move that into the, see if I can get that on my object there. It doesn't want me to. I'll put it, make sure I understand where the space is for that. I'm going to put it 0, 0, 0 where my other object is. I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to set my pivot to local so I can move around in the space. Why can't I see you? Because you're way over there. Light. Do the thing. Let's put it at 0, 0, 0 again. I don't know why the spotlight doesn't want to work. Is it not far enough back? There it is. So you can see the spotlight kind of just makes it look like a flashlight. And then there's a point light, which just radiates light all around from the center of this. So it's just kind of like a torch or something. But we'll put this back to a directional, because this is probably what you're going to be using in your scene. Just kind of like the sun, just directional light. And so there's other things that you can do with this. You can change the color of the light if you want. So I wanted like a red light. Let me move this little color thing in here. So to do that, I just went to color in the light component, and I just kind of, whatever, you could change the color that the light's actually going to look. I usually don't want to use completely white. Give it a little bit of character so we can kind of see what's going on there. But that's pretty much it for lights. They're just components that you add to the scene. There's 3 different types: point, directional, and spotlight. And you can change and make your scene look differently. You can make it look really good with lighting. Materials. So we want to add colors to these objects. And so I'm going to show you how to create a material real quickly and apply a material. And so I'm going to actually make a folder here just because I want to organize things. I'm going to go to right click on assets right down in here, and I'm going to create folder. I'm going to name it materials. And this is all done in that supplemental video that's in your beginnings assignment also. I'll just show you really quickly here. So I clicked on that folder, clicked on the material folder. I'm going to right click just in an open space here, go to create, and what I want to create is a material, and I'm going to call this material red. And you'll see it's not red, it's actually white when I created it. So where I go to change that is right here under main maps. First there's rendering mode here. So opaque is if it's just flat, not see-through. You can go down to transparent if you wanted something to be more see-through, but don't worry about that right now. But so this albedo right here, it's a weird word, but this would be where you're going to change the color. So you can do that by clicking right into this color wheel. I'm just going to bring that up. And if I wanted to make this material red, I would just move that over to red or change it to any color that I wanted to. I could change this on the side here to get any other color. But I want this to be super red, 255 on the R, nothing on the G, nothing on the B, and full alpha. Alpha is also, if you haven't heard of it, it is your transparency. So if I wanted it to be kind of see-through, I'd have to set that to transparent and set its alpha to a lower value. But I just want flat red. So I just made my first material, flat red material. And I could put it on this cube because it has a mesh renderer. And this mesh renderer has materials section. It's kind of hidden here and hard to see sometimes, but it has a little triangle by it, right by materials. If I drop that down, this has one material on it, and the material it has on it right now is the default material that Unity gives you, and it's just white. But if I wanted to change that, I just made my red one, and I could take this and I could drag it right onto that object. And you can see it changed the material in here to red. I could also click right here, and it would open up all the materials I have available. I could change it back to default if I wanted to from there, or I could change it back to red, and that might be hard to see. So it's this tiny little circle right here next to element brings up that, or you could just drag them on your object. So that is a very simple way of how to create materials and get colored on objects. Materials can become much more complex, but you need a mesh to put that on, and that's why this cube, this primitive, has a mesh on it. And we can create any colors that we want, and you'll have to do that in your assignment because you're going to want things to be different colors and want to add detail to it. So the next thing I want to talk about is a prefab. And so we looked at this assignment here. We looked at Pac-Man at the beginning, and I guess I can go to the lecture to see that, what Pac-Man looked like. And so there is no ghost. If I go into Unity, there is no under game objects, under 3D objects, there's no ghost here, right? That's something kind of complex I would have to create. And this is going to be about creating these complex objects. If we look in the assignment, you'll actually see those examples that we had in the lecture. And then these are the source images that you can choose from. But a complex object, if you look at how Mario was made here, he's made out of a lot of different little cubes. All these cubes have different materials on them and are put in different ways so that they look like Mario. And if I look from the side, this is what Mario is going to look like made up of all these cubes. So that is kind of how you're creating complex objects. And when you're creating these complex objects, you don't want to make them every time over and over and over again. So that's where we get the concept of a prefab. And so to make a prefab, I'm going to actually take a shot at making one of those ghosts in Pac-Man there. So I'll make the red ghost. So I'm going to get rid of this cube, I'll delete that, and I'm going to start my ghost with a sphere. And I didn't make that ghost. I think someone else made that ghost. I'm just going to try to recreate it just like you would. So I'm going to create a sphere, and the ghost kind of has a round head, and it's got these little, it's got those little things at the bottom that kind of look like, I don't know, jagged things. And then it's got eyes, and that's pretty much it. So this is going to be my round head here. I'm going to go again, and I'm going to put this object at 0, 0, 0, just because I like them there. And I'm going to make the red ghost. So I already made a red material, and I'm going to slap that on there. And so I need to get the ghost's kind of feet, or whatever you would call those. So I'm going to get creative with that. I'm going to go to Game Object, 3D Object, Cube, and I have this cube here right now, but that's not really what that looks like there. So I kind of need triangles at the bottom, so I'm going to get creative. I'm going to rotate this cube 45 degrees. And so I'm just going to do that up here, actually. 0, 0, 0. And I'm going to rotate it 45, not on the Y, sorry. On the Z, I'm going to rotate it 45 degrees. And this is how I'm going to create my little feet triangle, or whatever that is. And I'm going to scale this down because it's way too big to be that right now. So I'm going to scale this down into something that would kind of represent. And again, I scaled by hitting R, and I translate by going back and hitting that, or hitting W. And so I have this object here now, and I'm going to put my red material on this also. And that's kind of one little foot. So I want 3 of these. I'm going to duplicate this object. I'm going to hit, with this object selected, I'm going to hit Control D, and that's going to give me a new one right here. So cube 1. And I'm going to move it to the side. And I'm going to duplicate that. Control D, I got cube 2. And I'm going to move it over to the side also here. And now I kind of have those little jagged triangle feet thing that the ghost has. It's not perfect, but you know, it is what it is. And it still kind of looks weird because it's all kind of, this is a big sphere, and I scaled these in different ways, right? So one of the things I can do here is I can take these objects and I can flatten them. And you see how the scale, I selected all of them. I clicked on that, and I hit Shift and clicked on this one. I could change the scale of all these objects to something really small, like 0.1. And it'll flatten all of these things on the Z, so it looks much flatter. So when I click off it, I don't see the difference between the objects there. But this is starting to look like something. Not perfect, but it's starting to get there. If I wanted to, then I still need to kind of get rid of this area. So I'm going to make 2 new cubes. Or actually, I'm just going to take this cube, and I'm going to duplicate it again. I'm going to pull it out to the side. I'm going to actually rotate this back 45 degrees. Not on the Y. Sorry, I keep doing that. I'm going to remove this 45 degree rotation there, and I'm going to scale this a little differently so that I can hide some things here. I'm kind of going to make it thinner. And I'm going to make this like that. I'm going to take that and put it kind of like that. Duplicate it again and put this one out here like this. I got this. You'll see that I should probably be naming these objects because cube, I forget which one these are, so I should name them. And so now I kind of have, it's not perfect, but I have the shape. You can see there's little jags. I could probably spend a lot more time with this to make it better. But I kind of have the shape of a ghost right here. Now I just need eyes. And so eyes, I'd create a sphere. And it's already white by default, so that's great. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to scale it down. Hit R, scale it down, hit W to make it, to translate it. And I'm going to put it right out in front of here and kind of set it inside of here. I'm going to select it again. Bring it over. Make it a little bigger, actually. Okay, I'm going to duplicate that. Select a Control D. Make sure I'm translating that to W. Pull it over. All right, I got the white part of my eyes. So let's duplicate this. I'm going to pull this over. I'm going to make a new material in my materials folder because I need black. So let's right click, create. I wanted a material. I'm just going to name this black. But it's not black. And remember, I need to change weird albedo here to be black. I'm just going to click on black. Now I have black. And I'm going to drag this up onto this portion. I'm going to select this. I'm going to hit R to scale it. I'm going to make it a little smaller. Hit W. And you'll see that it's inside of the eye there now, so I don't really want it there. I want it outside of the eye so I can see it. So I'm going to pull it out a little bit. And I'm going to give him some character by making him look up and over to the side. I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to make another one here. And I'm going to look at this, and from far away, it looks pretty good. So now I have what I don't want to make that. If I had to make the blue ghost, I don't want to have to do that every single time, right? So what I want to do is make a prefab here. And to make a prefab, what I can do is all of these objects, I can kind of I could parent them. So we learned the concept of parenting to make sure that I don't want to have to move all of these individually. So if I have the body, which is the sphere, and I could name it body, right? I could take all of these objects, and if I select them all, I did that by clicking on it and then hitting shift. If I select all of them, I could put them underneath. I could just drag them on top of this sphere object, and you'll see they all kind of indent and go under here. And so now that means all of these things are parented to the sphere, right? So if I click the sphere, which is the body, and I hit W, I can move just that, and now all of those will be parented to it, meaning that they all follow it, and I don't have to move them all individually now. So these cube portions were all the body part, all the other body parts besides just the sphere. These were the eyes. So, if I wanted the black portion of the eyes to be parented to the actual individual portion of the eye, I could just drag this sphere on top of this one, and this one on top of this one. And again, you should name these because you can get very confused. So if I named that body, and I just click once inside of there, and name that left eye, and name this one right eye. I get a little bit more organization there. I should go in and name all of these pieces, but just for time, I'm not going to do that. So I have this body right here, and this is all the pieces of it, but I also want, I'm going to put this, I'm going to click on this body, I'm going to put him back at 0, 0, 0, and I kind of want this not to be named body. I could name this thing ghost just like this, but I'm going to make an empty game object, and I'm going to call that ghost. And I'm going to make sure that that empty game object is at 0, 0, 0. And I'm going to parent this. I'm going to make it the parent of this body. So now, if I click this empty game object and move it around, it takes all of those pieces and they're all parented to it so that I can move it around. So the last part of this is actually creating an object that will last, and I can make a copy of this. So I'm going to make a new folder by clicking on Assets, Create Folder, and I'm going to call this Prefabs. And these are all kind of the complex objects that you would make. And I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to drag Ghost from here into this folder and let go. And you can see now that I now have a copying machine for Ghost. I can just bring these into the world. Right? I've made a complex object and I put it into the prefabs folder, and now I can make copies of it. So if I ever got rid of this, if you got rid of this before and you didn't make a prefab of it, it would be gone. You'd have to recreate all that stuff again. But now I can delete this, and if I pull one back in, I got all these ghosts that I can put around here that are more complex objects. So that's the concept of prefabs and how we're going to use them, and how you use them and why you would use them in Unity. And how you, in the beginnings assignment, how you can start parenting things to get more uh, interesting objects. Like if we look in here at some of the options that you can use, right? There's a lot of interesting things that you can use to make up this and parent them and make a prefab. You can make a prefab of these Goombas, make a prefab of the brick so you don't have to do it every time. Make a prefab of this brick, make a prefab of this brick. And so that you can just start dragging them in. Make it once, start dragging them in, and start putting them where you need to. Make a prefab of the gems, I guess, if you needed to. And actually, you probably wouldn't. Those would just be spheres. But it's a good concept to understand. The last concept is the camera. So this is not what you see when you play the game. If I click the game right now, I'm going to see that. But this is what I see when I'm in this scene world, right? I can move this camera everywhere I want, but the game view is going to be whatever the camera looks at. And so there's an interesting thing about that because right now we have the main camera, which it gives you for free here, right? And it gave us a nice skybox, so it looks like we have a skybox. But if I wanted to change this, I could go to flat color. I could click on the camera, then go to clear flags. It says skybox right now. I could go to solid color and go to blue. If I wanted to change the color of that, we'll do this in the Pong assignment also. I could change it to black. And if you look in the scene, this doesn't look like this. But if I click on the camera, it looks like this. So the camera is what you're going to see. It's an game object in the world. Look, it has a transform just like everything else. And it is what you're going to be seeing in the world. It has a camera and some other components on it here that actually allows it to be a camera. So if I move this around, you can start to see this is what I'm going to see in the world. And you could parent this to things. You could do all types of things. Manipulate this camera here. There are two things that I won't get into actually all the pieces of the camera. I'm going to get more into that in a different assignment. I just want you to know that this camera, the actual camera that you see in the game scene, is not what you're seeing here. So if you want to take a picture for your assignment, you kind of want to position your camera into a place where you're going to be able to see it in here, and then go to your game view to take the picture of your actual assignment, because or you can hit play and it'll go to the game view automatically. And that's the play button. If you've never hit it, that will start your game. And nothing's going on in our game right now because we don't have functionality, we just put things in the world. So one of the other things, helpful hints, is if you want to look at some of these games are 2D that you look at, right? So this is a completely 2D game. This has a 3D look to it. It has perspective. This kind of has a 3D look also. This has a 3D look. But if you were making a 2D game and you wanted a full 2D look, you can click on the camera, the 2D camera here, this right here, and it will make your camera look 2D, and you can only move it around in 2D. If you wanted to move around in 3D space, you can click off that. But the camera also can make things look flat or like they have perspective. And you would do that by this projection right here. You could choose perspective, and that's going to allow you to see 3D and see perspective into the world. I won't get into the specifics why yet. We'll get into that later. Or orthographic. And orthographic is if you want something to look completely flat, you would just hit orthographic, and it looks the same because I made these kind of flat. But if I had a cube in here, so let me switch this back to perspective. If I put another cube in here, not an empty game object, a cube, please. So I have this cube, and I'm going to stretch it out a little, and make it at 0, 0, 0. And if I look into my camera now, and I see this cube, I'm going to lock this camera so that you can see it here. If I move this cube, if you look down here, you can see that if I come down this way, the cube, I can start to see different sides of it based on where it is in relation to the camera. And that's because I get perspective on this object. You'll really be able to see this if I make this longer in the Z. So if I make this really long in the Z, you're going to be able to see that this does not look like a cube anymore. When it's right on the same plane as the camera, it does. But if I start to move it, you start to see the perspective of this object. Um, and when you have objects moved around in 3D space, if you don't want it to look like that, if you want it to be completely flat, just hit orthographic. And when I hit orthographic, you saw that it doesn't care about the perspective anymore. When I look at the camera, it's not perspective anymore. We'll get into more of that later. Just it might be a useful tool for you if you're making a 2D scene. So that is all of the portions of what you need to know to do this first beginnings assignment. Prefabs, lights, all that stuff, camera. Remember, in the assignment, I want 3 screenshots of your progression, that first block out, and then the next progression shot, and then the final progression shot. And you can follow this rubric to see what your outcome is going to be for your grade. Please follow this to see what you want with that. And there are resources, like I said, there's this assignment or this lecture that you can look at. There's also another from another instructor, this basic game object, which goes over many of the things I went over in this lecture. So good luck, and I'm excited to see what you guys do with your beginnings journal assignment.